Hello guys, welcome to another episode of this tutorial. So yesterday we stopped at data types. We saw the different data types we have in JavaScript. We saw that we have strings, numbers, arrays, boolean, and objects. We also have um, one more that I didn't talk about, floats. Floats are basically numbers that are in decimals. For example, we could have 3 3.142. So this is a float. So they are basically decimals, decimal number. That's what a float is. You have 1.00. This is a float. So we have string, we have numbers, we have boolean objects, arrays, and floats. So today we'll be looking at arrays and objects. So what is an array? An array is basically a list of items stored in a single variable. Now, we said yesterday that a variable is basically a container that holds data or an information. Now, a variable can only store a single data or an information. For example, this nickname stores this build with steez, this age stores this 35. Now, unlike variables, an array can store more than one data. Now, this is basically what an array is and how it looks like. This array, OB, is storing these three data: coding, design, and music. So we can have more, can have anything there, anything. I mean, there is no excuse me, there's no limit to the number of data that an array can store. So think of an array like a shelf that is holding multiple books, a shelf that is holding multiple item. Now each item in the shelf has a position, many times called index. So each items in an array has a position called index, and the index starts from 0. What do I mean? In this array, this coding has an index of 0. In other words, the position is 0, right? This one has an index of 1. This one has an index of 2. Now, I can use the index to get that particular data. For example, I can say console. We looked at what console.log is yesterday. If you don't understand what console.log is or why we're using console.log, look at the previous video or watch the previous video. I can say hobbies 0. This 0 means index, right? Now, this will give us coding. Coding. If I view it in the console, let's look at it in the console. Can you see that we have coding? This here, coding. That's because we're basically calling the index of this, you know, item. If I say hobbies 1, you should have design, design. I say hobbies 3 or 2, you should have music. Now, if I say hobbies, hobbies 3, now hobbies 3 does not exist because index starts from 0, 0, 1, 2. Now, 3 does not exist. That's why we're going to have undefined, or I'm just simply going to have undefined, right? It's not defined. It means um, the console, JavaScript doesn't know what hobbies index 3 is. So that's how we can target each value in the item of the array. Basically use their index. Now, so Let's go back to our slide. All right, so each item has a position called an index and it starts from zero. I already explained that. Items are stored in order and can be accessed using their index. So basically, I can target or get or access any item in the array by knowing its index or from its index. So this is basically what an array looks like. And here we're logging out the first item of the array, that's index 0. Now, the number of items in the array gives the length of the array. So when we say what is the length of an array, we're basically referring to the number of items in the array. Now, for example, this array hobbies is holding 3 items. Now, we could log out, excuse me, the length of the array by just saying console.log hobbies.length. So the dot length method will give us the length of the array, the number of the array. So if we log this out, this should give us 3. So let's check it. Where is it now? It's I see 3. So that's the length of the array. So two things you need to understand about array. You need to understand that each item in the array has an index, and the index is gotten by saying the sorry each item in the array has an index, and that item in the array can be gotten from or with its index. Second thing is that arrays will obviously have length, and the length of the array is gotten by calling the dot length method. So hobbies.length will give us the length of the array. Now, what if the array is empty? This is an example of an empty array. Empty array. Now, if you do hobbies.length, what do you think you will get? You should have 0, right? Let's see it. 0. Now, 0 is different from undefined. 0, 0 and undefined are two different things. Undefined means that that value doesn't exist. 0 means that the value is 0. So the value of hobbies.length is 0, right? Now, I need us to understand that very well. So two things we've seen in an array or about arrays is that first, they store multiple items. Secondly, the items in the array have specific unique index, starting from the first item having the index of 0, the second item having the index of 1, third having the index of 2. That means that the sixth the item that has index 6 will be the fifth item. The item that has the index of 12 will be the 11th item. Item that has the index of 20 will be the 19th I item. And you can get that item by calling the array, in this case hobbies, and square brackets the index, right? So that should be clear enough. An empty array is an array that doesn't have any item in it, and in that case, the length of the array is 0, not undefined. So having understand that, let's now look at loops. Now, loops are also very important. I mean, it's one of the most important things that you need to understand in JavaScript. Now, what is a loop? A loop is basically um, going through each item in the array. When we walk through each item of the array in code, that is what a loop is. Now let me explain to you what I mean by loop. Now suppose we have an array, I'll call it fruits. Well, let me call it blog. and I say blog 1, or let me just put the title of the blog title 1, and each item in the array is separated by a comma. Don't forget that. Blog title, blog title 1, blog title 2, and I say blog title 3. Now, there are instances where I want to render to the screen the different blog title, right? I want to put each of the items inside that blog inside a div and render it to the screen. Now, that's where loop comes in. I want to, for each of the item inside the array, put it inside the inside the div, and render it to the screen. That means that this the screen will have three divs, and each of the div will have the different titles in this array. Now I can come to my GSX and say, let me just close this. Let me remove this. Yes, it is example, and say the first div, blog title 1, and say blog title 2, and I'll say blog title 3. Now this is, you know, what they call hard coding. Now I'm manually typing the block title inside their separate div. Now observe, what if the length of the array is into thousands or even millions? So does that mean that I'll have to write this 1 million times? Now look at it, just like we did this feature here. Now, so what if this feature is like 50? Are you telling me that we have to now write 50 different divs? I mean, that's time consuming. That's too much. I mean, if coding is like that, nobody will learn to code because it will be too tedious. I mean, even the computer say will run away. You get? Now, have you ever seen, of course, you must have seen blogs, and you find different, for example, we are all on Facebook. Now you're scrolling through a post and the post is looking like it is endless. Now, are you telling me that Facebook for each post wrote manually like millions of divs? That's not possible. Now that's where looping comes in, right? So the array contains the title of the blog, and for each of the title of the blog, we want to render it inside a div and render it out to our screen. So how do we do that? Now that's where the .map method comes in. The .map method is used to loop through each item of the array. It's used to loop through each items in the array. So let's quickly do it. So I could come here and say inside the curly braces, anytime you want to write JavaScript inside your GSX, you must always have it inside curly braces, right? So I could say blog dot map. Now dot map means that you want to loop through each items inside the blog. You want to loop through each item inside the blog. Now inside the map function, we'll have another arrow function. This is what an arrow function means. Just this and this. That's what arrow function is. So we'll say blog, right? Dot map, right? So inside the map, we'll have another arrow function, right? And then we'll open a bracket, not square bracket, not curly bracket, just normal bracket. Now, inside it, we'll have our div. We'll have our div. Sorry. div. Now, let me just put anything inside the div now. Let me put anything inside the div and let's see what appears on the screen. Now, can you see that anything appears 3 times? It corresponds to the number of items inside the block. So if we have like 10 items, I could just put one here, put two, put three. You see that the anything will increase. So the number of anything we have here, the number of divs we have here will correspond to the number of items inside the array. Don't forget, we're using the dot map method, and inside the map method we have our div. Now, so how do I now render the contents inside the div? Now, this arrow function has, excuse me, two arguments by default. Now, what is an argument? An argument is more like um you know what? Find out what an argument is. Assignments. So it has an argument I could call it anything. I could call it title, right? And then index. Now the index corresponds to the index of the item inside the array. Now while the title corresponds to the title of the array. So I could just say title. This title is what we are. So what will happen is for each item inside the array, it renders a div, right? And then it pulls each title inside the div, right? I could also even put the index beside it and say index. Can you see? So we have block title 0, 1, 0, block title 2, 1, block title 2, 3, 2, right? So this, sorry, block title 1, block title 2, block title 3, right? So this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 corresponds to the index. I believe this should be very clear. So we can, for each item inside the array, render, you know, them to the screen. I don't know if that's clear enough. Now, so it means that let's do something. We can, okay, let's not do it now. Let's not do it now. We'll do it later. Now, so we've looked through arrays. We've also seen how we can render each item in the array to the screen without having to manually type them out or hard code it. We can just use the dot map method. Please ensure you understand this very well. It's very key if you are going to proceed with this React tutorial. I mean, it's very, very important that you understand how to loop through an, an array. Right. So the next thing we'll be looking at is object. Now, what is an object? An object, let me go back to my slide. Oh, object is not here. So I'm just going to use my head. Now, an object is also a variable, right? That holds item in key value pairs. Now, just like array, an object is a variable that can hold multiple items in pairs. Now, just like we have a variable here, we say nickname build with this, right? Okay, let me even write another one out. I can say const, I can say user information, right? And I can say const name of the user. I'll say John. I'll say const email of the user, right? Creating separate variables for the name. I say John Doe at gmail.com. Can also say const age of the user. Can say 13 is user male. Can say true. Const is user male. I can say true. Now the reason why it's brought out that error is because I have age here, right? And I also have age here. So you can't use the same variable name for two variables, right? So let me delete it here. So I've stored each of the user information inside separate variables, right? Variable name is John, variable email is John Doe, variable age is 13, variable username is true. Now, this is a very good way to store user information, but it is space consuming, right? Now, the whole essence of objects is I can have all this information inside a single variable. Instead of having one, two, three, four variable, I can store it inside a single variable, and that's where object comes in. Now I can say const user is equal to curly braces. This is how you define an object. Once you define curly braces, JavaScript knows that it's an object. Now, so inside the object, I can say name semicolon string John separated by comma, email semicolon John Doe at gmail.com. I can also say semicolon age age is 13 number, and I can say is user male, not male oh, male. I say true. Simple. So instead of having four variables, I have just one variable user. Now, so how do I target the element? Now, just like array, each item inside um the object has an index, right? Now, so this index 0, this index 1, this index 2, and this index 3. But unlike array, we can't just say user 0. Let's see whether it will even work. Console.log user 0. Let's see what will happen. Can you see that it's undefined? Why? Because this is not an array, it is an object, right? So if we want to get each items, now the item inside an object is called elements. For example, this name is an element, email is an element of this object, age is an element of this, object user. Is user mail is also an element of the variable user. Also, how do I target each element? I could say user and the object name, right? Now, let me quickly say something else. Now, this name is called key, and this value is called value. So, inside an object, you have key, 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 value. Now, the value could be a boolean, it could be a string, it could be a number, it could also be a float. The value can also be an array in itself or an object. Value can be anything. In other words, I can have hobbies, and that hobbies is basically an array. Do you get my point? I can also have friends, and that friends is an object, right? It could be first friend, and then I put the name, second friend, blah 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 blah, blah like that. So the value can be any data types. Now arrays are very important. I mean, it's the heart of JavaScript. Understanding objects are very important. It is the heart of JavaScript. You know how to use objects, you'll be hot cake. I mean, you'll be hot cake. So username will give us John. Let's look at it. Coming. Oh, sorry. This has to be a string. There are two ways to get the elements inside, or get the value of a key. Like, can you see that it gives us John, right? This must be inside quotes. If I say user email, we'll have johndoe@gmail.com. If I say user age and so on, we should have 13. 13. Now the second way I can do it is to remove this bracket and say user.name. If I say user.name to give me John. If I say user.hobbies, user.hobbies should give me an empty array. Let me put something inside the array. Say dancing. And so you should have dancing, right? So that is how you can get the element inside an array. Sorry, inside an object. Now the last thing I want to talk about, which is the reason why I made this video, is an array can be an array of objects. That means the item inside an array can be, you know, an object. An array can be a list of objects. That's what I mean to say. So I can have blog. Let me delete this one and say blog is an array. Let me open it out. And inside the array, we'll have an object. Object one. We'll have another object. And we'll have, okay, let me do it so you see it. We'll have one object. We'll have another object. We'll have another object. We'll have another object. So this block is an array of objects. Let me write it down so you see. Array of objects. Right? So the same thing applies. Block one will give you this object. Block 0 will give you this object. Block 4, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3 will give us undefined. Block 3 will give us this object. If I say blog.length, the answer should be 4, right? Now, so an array can be a list of objects. Now, for each of the objects, I want to have an actual object. Now, so I can say title of the blog is who are we? Who are we, by the way? Right? I could say the body of the blog, right? Just put something inside, anything. Blog body. Could be anything. Now, I could also say likes. How many people like the blog? Say 10 likes. I could say clicks. How many people click the blog? I could say 100. Right? Then comments. You say comments. Comments would also be an array. Right? Then we say name. No, sorry, comments will be an array. And inside that comment, we'll also have another object. We say name, Ayomide, and he commented. What is his comments? Cool article. So comments, name, Ayomide, and he commented cool article. I'm just going to add another one. We'll say name, Mary, and she said, I feel this blog was done with chat GPT. It's not real. right? So we have an array, and the array is a list of blog objects, right? So inside this object, we have the title of the blog, the body of the blog, the likes, the clicks, and then the comments, right? These are typical backend, data looks like, right? So we're going to have another object, and you're going to have an error. Why? Because objects in items in an array must be separated by comma, right? So I'm just going to change this one to who are we by the way two. I'm going to leave the same information like that. Two, and then I'm going to have one more. Is right. So this blog has three items inside it, right? And the items are objects, right? So if I say console.log blog 0, what should we have? We should have this object. So let's see it. Can you see? Let me clear it again and then put it back. And you see that we have this object here. This block 0. Can you see? Title is title is who are we by the way. Body is this. Clicks is 100. Comments. Can you see? Likes is 10. Title is who are we by the way. So if I say 3, okay, 3 is not defined. 2, and then we should have title blog 2. Now, so we want to render this array to the screen, right? Want to render this array to the screen. So let's just quickly do it. So we say blog, right? Let me just remove this one. Inside it will have, inside the curly braces, we'll have blog dot map, right? And then to have an arrow function, and then we'll have normal brackets. Inside the arrow function, we'll have blogs, then we'll have index, right? So for each of the blocks, I'm going to render it inside a div. I have a div. Now I'm going to call this one blog container. So inside that one, I'll have another div, right? I'm going to call it title. Now don't forget that this blog here is an array. Can you see? It brings it up here. It brings it up here as an array. So inside that array, you have different elements. Title is string, body is this, likes is number, clicks is number, comment is also an array. Now, so if you put blog here, you are going to have, sorry, blogs, right? These blogs here must correspond to this. You are going to have an error. Why? Because JavaScript cannot render objects to the screen like that, right? So you have to render each element inside the blog. So I could say blogs dot title, right? And it will render each title in the objects inside the div. If you check it in the screen, you should have something like this. Can you see? Who are we by the way? Who are we by the way 2? And who are we by the way 3? So what is going on here? For each object inside this array, for each object inside this array, right? So we're rendering the what's it called now? The blocks that is inside this object, inside a div, are calling out the item here, right? So we could say class body puts blocks dot body, and could say, okay, let me just say title. title, body, and then I'll say likes. So blog the likes. I'll also say comments. Comments. Now, let's see something. If I say blog.comments, let's render it. See that nothing is showing on the screen because we have an error. Blogs.comments is also an array of objects. So we have to loop through this blog.comments again. So we have a loop inside a loop. So we can say comments, and then we say blogs dot comments dot map dot map. Then we'll have this. Inside it we'll have an arrow function. Then we'll have, so here we'll call this one comment. You can call it anything you want. Then we'll say index. So render that inside the div. Inside the div, and we'll say div name is comments dot name. This might be a little bit complex, but watch the video over and over again. I say comments, comment will be comments dot comments. Right? So we're done. Let's view it on the screen. Can you see? We have block title one. Let me push this one down a little bit. Let's say style, margin top. Right? So this blog one, title, body, 10 likes, comments, name Ayomide, comments, cool, name Mary, comments, I feel good. So that is how you can do achieve loop inside your React tutorial. So play around this and have ensure you understand what I just shared. So assignment will be put this inside an array of objects and render it to your screen like this with this design. Thank you for watching.